The Passover Exodus chapter 4 to 12. I want to tell you a story that is very familiar to many people. It's called the Passover. Reading in the Bible, we find that the children of Abraham wanted to follow God. Abraham had Isaac, and Isaac had Jacob, who was later called Israel, and a young son was called Joseph. It was during Joseph's time that the people of Israel went to Egypt. That was because there was not enough food in the land to sustain them. Joseph told them that this problem would last 7 years. Over the years, the people continued to live in Egypt. Their families grew to such an extent that the leader of the land, called Pharaoh, became afraid. He thought there were too many Israelite people in the land, more than the Egyptians. Previous to this, the people of Israel were able to work and gain money to buy things. Now Pharaoh made a new law. The Israelites were to become slaves. So they were beaten into submission by their cruel taskmasters. The people started to cry out to God to help them. Since God is good, He prepared a man to deliver them from Egypt. His name is Moses. God told Moses to go and tell Pharaoh to let God's people go. Well, Pharaoh did not like to hear that. He refused. So God made all the water in the land turn into blood. No one could drink from it or use it. Pharaoh still refused to let the people go. The second plague was a plague of frogs. Can you imagine? Everywhere you went, there were frogs. In your cooking pots, in your bed, on everything, on the floor, on the road. The frogs were everywhere. So Pharaoh called for Moses and asked him to get rid of the frogs. Moses said, "When do you want them delivered?" "Tomorrow." So God listened to Moses, and all the frogs were gone. But Pharaoh felt safe, and he hardened his heart. He said that the people could not go. Then there were the plagues of lice. The magicians tried to duplicate this plague, but could not. So they went to Pharaoh and told him that this was the hand of God working against Egypt. But Pharaoh again refused to listen. Each time Moses would tell Pharaoh to let God's people go so that they could serve God, and each time Pharaoh refused. Up until this point, the plagues attacked all of Egypt, including the Israelites. Starting with the fourth plague, God made a distinction between the Egyptians and the Israelites. Then swarms of flies attacked the Egyptians and not the land of Goshen, where the people of Israel lived. Then Pharaoh had Moses come and see him. He said that you could go and sacrifice to your God, but first you must get rid of these flies. So Moses said, "Tomorrow the flies will be gone." Then when the flies were gone, Pharaoh changed his mind and would not let the people go. God then used pestilence to kill the animals in the fields. Pharaoh noted that not one of the Israelites' animals were killed. Then God told Moses to throw up in the air handfuls of ashes. Then the Egyptians all had boils on their skin, both man and beast. Pharaoh still hardened his heart and would not let the people go. Now the Egyptians were beginning to believe that the God of Israel was stronger than their gods. They heard that God was going to bring hail down upon them. The animals and people who did not believe and were out in the fields died from the hailstorm. That was filled with ice and fire. However, God spared the Israelites. It seemed like he was getting more and more stubborn. Then there was a plague of locusts. It ate up all the plants and grass of the land. Everything was destroyed that could be eaten by the locusts. The Lord caused 3 days of darkness. This is interesting since the Egyptians believed strongly in the sun god. They found out that their gods were powerless against the God of heaven and earth. There was one final plague. All of the firstborn males in a family would be destroyed unless they had an unblemished lamb, took its blood, and covered the lintel and doorposts of their homes and stayed inside. If they did not obey God and follow what God said, the oldest son would die. The Egyptian son died, including Pharaoh's son. Pharaoh was so heartbroken that he told Moses to go and get out of his sight. Take the people with him. The Egyptians were so desirous for the Israelites to leave that they gave their jewelry, silver and gold. So the Egyptians were plundered. Pharaoh and the people of Israel worshipped many idols. So each of the plagues that was placed on Egypt was to show the people who is God. So the people of Israel left to go to the land God had promised. They were to remember what God had done for them. He passed over them and saved them from death and destruction. The next story is about that journey.